Hi everyone, today we are going to get familiar with decision table testing. We will quickly go through the theory and then we'll resolve 3 questions from ISTQB sample exam. Decision tables testing, a black box test technique. Decision tables are a good way to record complex business rules that a system must implement. And we have 6 steps which we need to follow when we use the technique. Identify conditions and the resulting actions. Identify the aspects of conditions that need to be combined and put them into a table. Identify the correct outcome for each combination. Create a full decision table. Delete columns that do not affect the outcome. Have at least one test case per decision rule in the table. We are not going to dive deep into details now. As I told before, this theory much easier to explain for me and much easier to understand for you when we resolve tests related to the decision table testing technique. Let's move to our first example. Decision table testing is very useful technique on the real projects. Very often you have a features which has different conditions and business outcome. You read business requirement, create a table and design tests. But in the ISTQB tests it is quite different. They create a table for you, but miss something important. And mostly it confuses more than it helps. Let's get familiar with the test. Pause the video and read the text on your own. The first task is to identify conditions and the resulting actions. We need to define conditions and results and create a table. We have business requirements. A company's employees are paid bonuses if they work more than a year in the company and achieve a target which is individually agreed before, which are transformed into conditions in the table. Condition number 1, employment for more than 1 year. Second condition is agreed target and the third one, achieved target. And we have only one resulting action, bonus payment. As I said, this was already done for us. Second thing which we need to do is identify the aspects of conditions that need to be combined and put them into a table. Those can be true, false, or doesn't matter. Which means that we need to write all possible conditions. In our case, for example, employment for more than 1 year. It can be only yes or no. Same for second and third conditions. And all possible combinations of those values. Like, employment for more than 1 year, yes. Agreed target is no. And archive target also is no. Next one, all 3 are no, and so on. Basically it should cover all possible combinations of yes and no. As you see, I added 4 additional test cases. Test case 5, yes, no, yes. And 3 more. These 8 covers all possible combinations. That is a tricky one, because some of the combinations are already written, and we need to add those which are missed. If we would do it from start it would be easier. The next step is to identify the correct outcome for each combination. For actions we have only 2 possible states. Action should occur or should not occur. Let's check our description one more time. A company's employees are paid bonuses if they work more than a year in the company and achieve a target which is individually agreed before. This means that action bonus payment will be yes only when all 3 conditions will be yes as well. If one condition is no, then action is no. Because of this, 4 our additional test cases has an action no. Let's move on to the next step. A full decision table. I'm not going to read this one more time, you can do it on your own. This is exactly what we did. We wrote all conditions and all possible unique combinations of the conditions. Which means we have full decision table. With ISTQB test I recommend to do it every time. On the real project it is possible that you will have 5 or more conditions. Or you can have conditions which has more than 2 values. Not only yes and no, but 20 values. In that case it will be hectic to write full table, you will need to be smart and reduce the number of test cases. Which moves us to the next step, delete columns that do not affect the outcome. In our case we have a restriction in the description. Which of the following test cases represents a situation that can happen in real life and is missing in the above decision table? We need to check each answer and find out if it is a real scenario or not. As you see, each of the answers are missed test cases from the table. For example, answer A. Condition 1, yes, condition 2, no, condition 3, yes, action, no. Matches our test case number 5. To have it in the table helps us to define if it is real scenario or not. And we can say that answer A is not correct. If there was no agreement on targets, it is impossible to reach the targets. One more time. Condition number 3, achieved target, depends on condition number 2, agreed target. If condition number 2 is yes, then condition number 3 can be yes or no. If you agreed on a target, that it is possible that you have achieved it already or you haven't achieved it still. But if condition number 2 is no, then condition number 3 is no, also by default. If there is no target, you can't achieve it. Since this situation can't occur, this is not a scenario happening in reality. Let's check answer B. It doesn't match any of our test cases. Condition 3, achieved target is no. But action, bonus payment is yes. And it is not correct. As we discussed before, action can be yes only if all of the conditions are yes. The test case is objectively wrong. Answer C matches our test case number 8. And it is not correct also. Same reason as in answer A. There was no agreement on targets, it is impossible to reach the targets. If there is no target, you can't achieve it. Since this situation can't occur, this is not a scenario happening in reality. And the last one, answer D. It is correct answer. The test case describes the situation that the too short period of employment and the non-fulfillment of the agreed target leads to non-payment of the bonus. This situation can occur in practice but is missing in the decision table. Because of this, the answer D is correct. It is possible that explanation was fast, but I don't want to make the video last an hour. You can just watch it one more time. It is very simple. Let's check one more example of decision table testing. Pause the video and read the text on your own. The first task is to identify conditions and the resulting actions. We need to define conditions and results and create a table. And as in the test before, it is already done for us. The problem with this test is that we don't have business requirements. And we will just take the proposed table as a source of truth. We can see that there are two conditions, speed 50 and school zone. And actions, $250 fine and driving license withdrawal. The first step is already done for us. Second thing which we need to do is identify the aspects of conditions that need to be combined and put them into a table. Those can be true, false, or doesn't matter. In our case, each condition can be only true or false. We have two conditions, that's mean we can have 4 combinations in total. 2 combinations are already provided. R1 scenario, where speed exceeds 50 km per hour, is true, and school zone is true. And R4 scenario, where speed exceeds 50 km per hour is false, and school zone is false. That is a tricky one, because R1 and R4 scenarios are defined, and it means that R2 and R3 are missed, and we need to add them. I assigned R2 to the test case, where speed exceeds 50 km per hour is true, but school zone is false. R3 scenario is assigned to the test case, where speed exceeds 50 km per hour is false, but school zone is true. We can say that we are finished with step 2, identify the aspects of conditions that need to be combined and put them into a table. Because only 4 combinations are possible, and we have added them into the table. The next step is to identify the correct outcome for each combination. For actions we have only 2 possible states. Action should occur or should not occur. Let's check our description one more time. We have 2 actions, $250 fine and driving license withdrawal, but we don't have clear requirements and rules. You remember that we need to assume a lot of stuff, and here we can assume. For example, for scenario, where speed exceeds 50 km per hour is true, but school zone is false. Action should be $250 fine only. And for speed exceeds 50 km per hour is false, but school zone is true. It can be anything, depends from government rules. But we can't be 100% sure here for now. Let's move to the next step. Our next step is a full decision table. This is exactly what we did. We wrote all conditions and all possible unique combinations of the conditions. which means we have full decision table. Next step is delete columns that do not affect the outcome. In our case, we skip this step because our table is limited and we didn't add impossible scenarios. Let's try to resolve a test now. We see that we are asked which two of the additional test cases would achieve full coverage of the complete decision table when combined with the test cases that have already been generated for rules. And we have 4 additional test cases proposed. To confuse us, ISTQB authors put actual speed value here. I changed it to the Boolean, true and false values. Let's check each of the test case proposed to us. DT1 scenario, where speed exceeds 50 km per hour is true and school zone is true. As we see, conditions are the same as in test case R1, which means that test case DT1 is useless. DT2 scenario, where speed exceeds 50 km per hour is false and school zone is true. This test case is mapped to our test case, R3, which means that test case DT2 can be added to the original scope. DT3 scenario, where speed exceeds 50 km per hour is true and school zone is true. Same reason as with first step, as we see conditions are the same as in test case R1, which means that test case DT1 is useless and shouldn't be added. DT4 scenario, speed exceeds 50 km per hour is true and school zone is false. This test case is mapped to our test case, R2, which means that test case DT2 can be added to the original scope. It means that we need to add 2 test cases DT2 and DT4. And answer C is a correct answer. This is easy question, let's move on to the next one. Let's check one more example of decision table testing. Pause the video and read the text on your own. Let's check the algorithm. The first task is to identify conditions and the resulting actions. We need to define conditions and results and create a table. And as in the test before, it is already done for us. We can see that there are 2 conditions, condition number 1, account password OK. And condition number 2, sufficient points. Same with actions. Action number 1, show flight history. And action number 2, allow reward travel. We have one issue with condition number 1, account password OK. It is actually 2 conditions, not 1. As we see in the description. Suppose that there are 2 equivalence partitions for the condition where account password OK is not true, one where the account is invalid and another where the account is valid but the password is invalid. This is done to confuse us. Because of this, I've divided condition account password OK condition to the 2 separate conditions, account OK and password OK. Now it corresponds our description. We have finished with the first step, identify conditions and the resulting actions. Let's move to the next one. Second thing which we need to do is identify the aspects of conditions that need to be combined and put them into a table. Those can be true, false, or doesn't matter. Let's check our table. Conditions, account OK and password OK, are simple. Those can be only yes or no. The problem is with condition, sufficient points. This is the first test where we have condition state doesn't matter. We need to assume here because we don't have straightforward requirements. As we see in the description. Consider the following decision table for the portion of an online airline reservation system. And we see that first step is marked as doesn't matter. This is because it has dependency on previous steps. If account is invalid or the account is valid but the password is invalid, then we won't log into the reservation system. And we won't check condition sufficient funds. As ISTQB designed table this way, then we also can use doesn't matter state for our additional combinations. Now we need to define all possible combinations of the conditions. In this test we have 2 actual combinations. First one is account and password. Both can be valid, both can be invalid, or only one can be valid. To cover those combinations we added test cases 4 and 5. Second combination is related to conditions password account OK and sufficient funds. And we have 3 possible combinations. 2 of them are related to the valid password and account. In that case, sufficient funds can be or yes or no. Third combination is for invalid condition, password account OK. In this case we don't care about the sufficient funds condition. Because outcome will be the same. We are done with this step, identify the aspects of conditions that need to be combined and put them into a table. Let's move to the next one. The next step is to identify the correct outcome for each combination. For actions we have only two possible states. Action should occur or should not occur. For this test it is an easy one. Because business logic dependency is provided in the table. If account and password are correct, but user doesn't have sufficient points, then flight history is shown, but travel reward isn't allowed. If account and password are correct, and user have amount of points is sufficient, then flight history is shown, and travel reward is allowed. For all other scenarios, whether password or account is not correct, actions are no. As we see in our test cases 1, 4, and 5. We have finished with the step, identify the correct outcome for each combination. Let's move to the next one. Next step is, delete columns that do not affect the outcome. In our case it is scenario number 5. Let's check description again. Suppose that there are two equivalence partitions for the condition, where account password OK is not true. One where the account is invalid. This is test case number 1. And another where the account is valid, but the password is invalid. This is test case number 4. Suppose that there is only one equivalence partition corresponding to the condition, where account password OK is true, where both the account and password are valid. This is test cases number 2 and 3. But we don't have information about scenario, where both account and password are not OK. Because of this, we delete test case number 5. Because this column doesn't affect the outcome. Let's try to resolve a test now. We are asked for, if you want to design tests to cover the equivalence partitions for account password OK, and also for this portion of the decision table, what is the minimum number of tests required? And during our steps we have found that we need 3 test cases to cover equivalence partitions related to the password and account. And we need 1 additional test case to cover combination of valid condition and sufficient funds. Because of this the right answer is C, we need 4 test cases. To be honest this question isn't straightforward. You have multiple choices how to resolve it. And each approach will have some proofs and cons. Please share your thoughts about this question in the comments. Decision table testing is very useful technique on the real projects when you have business requirements with have combinations and dependencies. It helps a lot with designing tests when you have limited time. The main difference between reality and ISTQB test is that in reality, you will create a table on your own. Of course you can miss something. But when you create it on your own, and you have people from the product team to answer your questions, it is much easier than in the tests. ISTQB tests doesn't have good description which answers all questions needed to create a table. And tables which are provided are not clear and mostly miss something. This makes tests very complex, and students doesn't use decision table testing on real projects. I recommend once you will pass the exam, read the chapter again and try to use it on your project. You'll see that it is very beneficial. If you are watching this video, you are most likely looking for answers to 2 questions. How to prepare and pass the ISTQB Foundation Level exam? And how long will it take? Let's quickly find the answers to these. First of all, let's find out what the exam looks like. The exam shall comprise 40 multiple choice questions. Each correct answer has a value of 1 point. A score of at least 65%, 26 points or more, is required to pass. The time allowed for each examination is exactly 60 minutes. Let's check exam sample. As you see, 40 questions in total. Each question has value of 1 point. And each question has 4 possible answers. A, B, C, and D. And only 1 is correct. Some questions are quite easy. Like these. Other questions are extremely complex. Like this one. And one more thing, which we need to know before answering our questions, is that there are 6 chapters in the foundation level, Chapter 1, Fundamentals of Testing, and so on, and each chapter is divided to sections, like, what is testing, and so on. This is the fastest possible overview of the ISTQB Foundation Level exam. Without it, I can't answer those 2 questions correctly. Let's find the answer to question number 1. How to prepare and pass the ISTQB Foundation Level exam. First, what you need to do is to read a relevant material for the test preparation. It is not a problem. You can read a book written for that purpose by the authors of the exam. It is also divided to the 6 chapters and each chapter to appropriate section. And second thing which you need is a lot experience of resolving tests. As you saw, exam consists of 40 questions divided to these 6 chapters. Because of this, I designed my course in the same way. So you can resolve questions based on not even chapter, but the section of the chapter. Theory is complex, there are a lot of classifications, terms, definitions, diagrams and classifications. So this approach will be the most effective to take it with small pieces. Read a section in the book or syllabus. Then you can resolve questions related only to that section. I have passed the exam again in November 2020 and updated all questions to meet the new theory and be as similar to the real ones as possible. Once you will finish to read a book and resolve questions for all 6 chapters, you would be able to train with around 10 exam samples. Again based on the rules which we already know. Based on the time you are able to dedicate, preparation shouldn't take more than couple of weeks. All of this you'll be able to find in this course. So, if you are interested to pass the exams successfully, welcome to this journey.